Donald Trump comparison is back to the future. In fact, it's actually front page news in New Hampshire, where union leader publisher Joe McQuaid claims the Republican frontrunner is insulting the intelligence of voters, writing in part, quote, Trump has shown himself to be a crude blowhard with no clear political philosophy and no deeper understanding of the important and serious role of President of the United States than one of the goons he lets rough up protesters in his crowds. On February 9th, we trust New Hampshire Republicans will send Biff Trump back to somewhere, anywhere, but on the road to the most important elective office in the United States. Pretty harsh words there. Joining me now for our Daily Fix, NBC's Hallie Jackson live in Nashua, New Hampshire, the Washington Post, Ann Guerin, and Huffington Post senior politics editor Sam Stein. Thanks to all of you for being here this afternoon. And Hallie, I want to start with you and this union leader editorial. Really tough words, but do you get the sense that it's going to move the needle with Republican voters out there in New Hampshire?
Doubtful with people who already support Trump, Kristen, and that's clear even though the union leader is a strong conservative voice in many communities here in New Hampshire. The union leader came out last month endorsing Chris Christie, taking some subtle swipes at Senators Rubio and Cruz. So it's no surprise now that the paper and the publisher would go after Donald Trump. The language is particularly harsh, calling him, as you pointed out, a crude blowhard, predicting that New Hampshire will be where the Trump balloon deflates, if you will. But this is not likely to be something that Trump will give much of a second thought. You may see him tonight kind of hold up the paper. We've seen him do that at rallies before, probably take aim at the union leader. But this is not something that should be a surprise to anybody who's followed politics in New Hampshire, Kristen. And let's be honest, it allows us to talk about Hello McFly and run some Biff Tannen sound bites on MSNBC. So all in all, not a bad day.
Great point. Sam, I hear you laughing. Hallie brings up the point. He'll probably use this to try to rally his supporters tonight. What do you make of this?
Oh, I can totally see it. He'll take the paper, rip it up, throw it in the air, do something dramatic. And I really do doubt that this has much of an impact on Donald Trump, considering all the other things that we've said we're going to usher in his doom as a presidential candidate. This seems relatively minor. Well, first things first, the Biff Tannen comparisons have been sort of rumored for years, dating back to Back to the Future 2's release in 1989. So this is not new stuff. We've looked into it, too. It's very serious. Secondly, Donald Trump is running against institutions, not just, politics as usual, but the institutions of government, the institutions of the Republican Party, the institutions of the political press. And so for an editorial as old as the New Hampshire union leader to come out and criticize him like this almost plays into his hand in a certain way.
Really important point. Speaking of institutions, he's now not only going after Hillary Clinton, but former President Bill Clinton. I want to read you what he tweeted out just today. This is a Trump tweet. Quote, if Hillary thinks she can unleash her husband with his terrible record of women abuse while playing the women's card on me, she's wrong. And weigh in on this. The Clinton campaign has already come out and said this is yet another example of Trump being sexist. What do you make of this line of attack? Could it backfire for Donald Trump?
It could. It's really interesting. He is explicitly warning Hillary Clinton and saying, be careful. Remember, in all caps in tweets, be careful. And that, first of all, the Clinton people are just, privately seething, going nuts. They're not saying anything publicly about it, at least not in the last couple of days, sort of taking the attitude that this is beneath them. And that's a strategy as well. But to your question about whether this could backfire for Trump, in the short term, probably not. As with attacking the union leader editorial, will sort of, he could use it as a prop. It will play into the strategy he's using in the short term of riling up the primary voters. Long term, if he is the nominee or on the path to being a nominee, he will need the votes of moderate women and of both parties, and that is an audience that is not likely to like any of this.
Sam, weigh in, if you will. We just interviewed Republican Congressman Peter King, and even he said, look, Republican voters really want to be talking about issues related to 2015. Sure, this might get them excited, might get a few more folks to the poll, but is this a smart strategy on the part of Trump?
No, it's not. You talk to Republican strategists who actually have done polling of those moderate women voters and also non-moderate women voters. They tend to not get moved by attacks on Bill Clinton the issues that he's had with women, and they actually feel like Hillary Clinton is victimized in those attacks, and it draws people sympathetically towards her. So I agree with everything that's been said. There's a segment in the Republican base that does think this is fair game, wonders why candidates don't go there when it comes to Hillary Clinton, and encourages it from the candidates. So they'll be enamored with Donald Trump if he does this. But if you ask Republican strategists who look at the data if this is wise, they say absolutely not. In fact, it could be very counterproductive.
I want to play a clip from over the weekend. John Dickerson interviewing Stephen Colbert on Face the Nation about Donald Trump. Let's take a listen to that, and I'll get you all to react on the other side.
What's your view about the facts? Facts and their saliency in the conversation.
I'm a big fan of facts. I'm not sure they have any bearing on what person's popularity is, because Donald Trump is like, I'm not the first person to say this, but I completely agree that he's my old character with $10 billion. You know, he's completely playing on an emotional level, and so beautifully. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I just can't do that old character anymore, because he's doing it better than I ever could.
Hallie, weigh in on that, if you will. And I know you've been talking to Trump supporters for months now. Stephen Colbert raises the point that this is very emotional for his supporters.
Correct. And something else that he said, Kristen, that we didn't play there, Stephen Colbert talked about how he can kind of understand the appeal that Donald Trump has when it comes to the part of the Republican electorate that is angry, that is looking for a change, that wants to see something different than what we've seen for the last several decades. And that's what we've talked about all the time. That is exactly what Trump is tapping into. So people here, you know, whether it's the union leader endorsement, whether it's, you know, media calling out Trump for example, misstatements or things that he says that maybe aren't backed up by facts, that just plays into Trump's hands more and more. You asked people out here about these things, people in New Hampshire, people in Iowa, we've been all over the campaign trail, and they'll look at you and they'll say, we just don't believe you, the media. We just don't believe you. We believe Mr. Trump, and we want to give him a chance.
Yeah, really fascinating. And Ann, I want to turn back to you. Hallie's in New Hampshire, but of course, Iowa gets the first shot at weighing in, and Ted Cruz is leading there. What would a Cruz victory in Iowa mean for the Donald Trump candidacy? Would it really take away from his momentum in a significant way?
I don't think it would derail him. I think it would dent him a bit, and makes New Hampshire all the more important for him. And New Hampshire, it's not a given for him either. So it's really interesting. He could go from what seems like a juggernaut now to maybe a slightly banged up car in February. Again, all of us have been wrong over and over and over again about when the Trump train will derail. So I'm not going to make some grand prediction here. But Iowa is very, very important for him. He has to look viable, even if Ted Cruz actually bests him in Iowa.
And Sam, there are reports that his ground game actually isn't as strong as he is making it out to be. Do you anticipate that Trump's actually going to turn a lot of this passion and energy and excitement that we see on the campaign trail into votes?
Well, and this is the $30,000 question, or whatever you want to call it, whatever value you want to put on it. You have to actually touch base with these voters time and again if you want them to go out and caucus for you. It's not enough to just be the candidate of the moment, to have a passionate following. There's an organizational element to Iowa that matters, and you can ask Howard Dean about that, because in essence, that's what happened to him, was a lot of passion but not enough organization. And it remains to be seen if Trump's going to invest the money that he clearly has into building that infrastructure. So far, he does have offices there. He does have staff there. But like you mentioned, there's not great data pointing to a great organizational infrastructure in Iowa. And then the last thing that we need to see is, what does he do in the wake of a defeat? Iowa could very
his public campaign to reach out to the public on this matter. But I want to turn to politics now. Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner right now, taking a new tactic, going after not only Hillary Clinton, but former President Bill Clinton. I want to read you his tweet from yesterday. He tweeted out, Hillary Clinton has announced that she is letting her husband out to campaign, but he's demonstrated a penchant for sexism. So inappropriate. I want to just get you to weigh in on this strategy, Congressman. Is this wise to go after former President Bill Clinton? Is this something that Republican voters want to hear about, or do they want to be talking about issues related to 2015?
I think it's a matter of strategy. It may work in the short term for Donald Trump because Hillary Clinton is going to be the Democratic nominee. As long as he's fighting with her, he's not fighting with other Republicans, and this will appeal to the Republican base. Overall, I don't think it's going to be effective because the Clinton administration is behind us. I think there are legitimate issues in the Clinton administration that can be raised, as far as budget issues, as far as military issues, that type thing. And I think if Hillary Clinton, if she oversells the issue of somehow sexual harassment or sexual criticism of Donald Trump, then maybe this is fair comment. But I don't think the American people want to go there. That to me, this should be the Republican nominee versus Hillary Clinton. There's enough issues that we disagree with Hillary Clinton on to focus on that. I don't think the American people want to go back to the days of what happened back in 1997 and 1998.
You raised the point about the long term. The Democrats are ready to fire back. Take a listen to what Debbie Wasserman Schultz told Andrea Mitchell, who moderated Meet the Press over the weekend.
He had his problems in 2008. We saw what happened in that campaign. But if Donald Trump is going to raise this issue, as he is warning, of Bill Clinton's past and sexism, does that give you any pause as Democratic chair?
I think that Donald Trump or any candidate on the other side of the aisle would raise Bill Clinton as somehow a negative to their peril. I think every poll I've ever seen shows that if President Clinton were a candidate tomorrow, he'd be reelected.
Could Trump's words actually backfire in a general election, Congressman?
If he overplays this part of it, yes. I think, listen, there are legitimate criticisms you can make of Hillary Clinton and of President Clinton. It should be done at that level. And I think the more he talks about these side issues, the more it distracts people from the real issues. And again, this may work again with the Republican base in a primary, but if you go into the general election, people want to see more than that. And as far as Bill Clinton, yeah, Bill Clinton is popular, and but again, he's not invulnerable. But again, the side issues to me are not relevant.
And let's talk about the general election. You have criticized some of Trump's comments about Muslims recently. Will you support him, Congressman King, if he's the nominee?
Well, I would support the nominee of my party, but again,
even
it's
if
the
it's
extent
Trump.
of. It's a question of how strong the support would be. And it's not just, the issue on Muslims. There's any other, like, for instance, where he's comparing the U.S. to Putin, or some moral equivalency between Vladimir Putin and the U.S., where he says that President Bush knew about 9/11. I mean, all of that's just like crazy talk. And to me, a Republican conservative should not be endorsing those views. Listen, I knew guys like Donald Trump growing up. He and I are about the same age. We lived about 20 minutes away from each other. But he was a multimillionaire, and I was in a blue-collar neighborhood. And guys like him talked a lot. The guys in my neighborhood talked and delivered. So I'm not that intimidated by Donald Trump.
All right, let me ask you one final question, Congressman. You and I have discussed on this program whether or not you would run for president. You decided not to. I wonder now, when you look at the scope of the Republican field, how many candidates there are, do you ever have moments of regret that you didn't get into this race?
I feel like Marlon Brando. I could have been a contender, but I didn't have the money, and what can I tell you? Life goes on. The country will survive without me. But yeah, when I look at what's going on in the debate, I say, God, I could be the guy that's in there, and I could be the guy in the White House next year recognizing Kristen Welker at a news conference.
All right. Well, Congressman King, we will leave it on that point. Marlon Brando.
Okay.
I like the analogy. Have a great rest of your holiday.